In this video, we'll have a closer look at what happens when you create an object. Remember that classes are templates for creating objects, and you can instantiate an object of a specific class using the keyword new. What happens under the hood is, first, the Java virtual machine allocates enough memory to store the object, and secondly, it calls what's called a constructor method that is there to initialize it. A constructor method is a special method that gets called when the object is created. It's intended to set up all the values of your attributes for later use. The syntax for the constructor method is pretty much the same as for any other method, only that it must be called exactly like the class, and secondly, it cannot return anything. Here's an example of our rectangle class, but now I've added a constructor methods from line 5 to 8. What this does is it takes two parameters, an integer and a string, and it simply stores the given values in the attributes defined in line 2 and 3. Using this constructor method, we can instantiate an object of type rectangle using two parameters as below here. Doing so, we'll call this constructor method and initialize the values to 5 and the string red, respectively. A class can have more than one constructor, and that's fine as long as they have different signatures. If you don't define any constructor yourself, don't worry, you will simply get a default constructor for your class, and this simply means it's a constructor method that takes no parameters and does nothing. Here's again our rectangle class, now with multiple constructor methods. The first one takes an int and a string as before, the second one just takes an integer, and the third one takes no parameters at all. And having these three constructor methods means that we can instantiate the class in three different ways. The first object, R1, here is created using the constructor method in line 7. The second one is created using the constructor method that only takes an integer, which is the one defined in line 6. And the last one takes both an integer and a string, which is the one that is defined in line 5. Finally, let me mention that you can call one constructor from within another one. And the use case for this is you might have one very complex constructor method that takes lots and lots of values that are just stored in attributes. And then you might have a constructor method for only a subset of these parameters that can then call the previous one with some sane default values, which is what happens in this piece of code here. We have a constructor method that just takes the integer, which is the one defined in line 9. And in fact, what it does is it calls the previous constructor method using the keyword this. So this is a call to the constructor method defined in line 5 because it is given two parameters, one integer and one string, and it matches the signature of the constructor method defined in line 5.